Hi. A film that I saw recently that's been gaining a lot of traction during awards season is Flea, a Danish language documentary, I think made with um, funding from various other countries, about Amin, the young man who travelled from Afghanistan across half of Europe to Denmark today. And the film is a partially dramatised, partially simply narrated documentary, but it's entirely animated. We have some live action scenes consisting of newsreel material, but all the dramatized or interview elements are animated, in part to give Amin a degree of anonymity, but also to represent things that cannot otherwise be shown. Amin now is a successful, uh, financially comfortable married man living in Copenhagen. But he was born in Afghanistan in the 1980s, and he tells the story of his experience with the takeover by the Taliban after the departure of the Russians, excuse me, and the subsequent extreme um, religious totalitarianism. His family's flight across country, losing his father along the way, the fate of whom he still doesn't know to this day, until the family was able to get to Moscow, where they lived illegally for some years. He tells of how his family tried to save money by the eldest son working off the books in Sweden as a cleaner, sending money back home, so hoping that they could pay a people smuggler, a people trafficker, to get the rest of his family over. And in piecemeal, the family manages to escape, but in such a way as they are still separated, all living more comfortable lives, perhaps, than they might otherwise do in various countries around continental Europe, but nevertheless still separated. The story of Amin's journey is compelling. I've said before, I think it was in the podcast on Threads, that you can hear stories about something and they don't really mean anything. They don't really capture your attention and your imagination of what that experience might truly be like until you can see it for real, even if it's in a fictional context, if it's entirely dramatized, entirely with actors. I said it in Threads about actually seeing what nuclear devastation would be like, and seeing all those people dying of COVID-19 looked like, saying their last goodbyes on a smartphone. So seeing Amin's story of his travel across Russia, across the Baltic Sea, seeing it for real, albeit in animated form, and it's a stylized form of animation, but it's real enough to bridge the mental gap. It's disturbing, isn't quite the word, but it's arresting. Telling the story of his family being placed inside a shipping container for transport across the ocean, a container that is then entirely blocked in by other containers, meaning that escape is impossible, and then traveling across rough seas. It's a nightmare. It doesn't sound like anything other than a nightmare. The film is surprisingly disciplined in its structure. The story is clear. It's interspersed with scenes of Amin going about his life today in in present day Copenhagen, and one particular element that is dealt with extremely casually in the present day um, materials, but gradually becomes more important as he tells his story in the flashback, is that he's gay. He is now married, living with his husband very happily in Copenhagen, and it's not an issue there at all. But the issue of his coming out as gay and um, his first feelings for other young men is dealt with in an extremely interesting way. I won't go into that matter in detail because I'm going to have to leave some things for you to discover watching the movie. But um, it shows it subverts from what one might expect to happen, um, and shows that compassion for one's family, I think, overrides any kind of traditional upbringing, or at least it should. And we're given a very good example in this case. It's an excellent film, I thought. It's surprisingly tight. It's barely 90 minutes, along with its rather long end credits, necessary for the amount of animation. But I would recommend it very highly indeed. It's a fascinating story, and I've always said that I watch movies because I want to see something new. I want to be shown something I haven't seen before. And in the case of this film, not only haven't I really needed to.